I would like to welcome all of you and thank you for asking me to speak. As I stood on the battlefield of Second Bull Run in Chantilly, I would have never imagined myself standing before you today in front of my friends, my family, my colleagues, and my fellow townsmen. I guess now is a greater time than ever to introduce myself. I'm General Thomas F. McCoy of the 107th Pennsylvania Volunteers, which was raised from the great counties of Franklin, York, Dauphin, Cumberland, Lebanon, Lancaster, Schuylkill, Juniata, Luzerne, Bedford, Fulton, and of course my mother county, Mifflin. These of which I assisted and eventually solely commanded through approximately 51 engagements, services, and tours of duty. That may bewilder many of you, but do not forget that anything is possible when one is solely and wholeheartedly committed to the duty of patriotism, protection, and preservation of the greatest union known not only to man, but also to God. I'd like to give pause for the brave and courageous and great sons of Mifflin County that were not granted safe passage home as I was. These and all other great and wonderful men of Mifflin County that was raised from her bosom were the finest, the bravest, the most gallant, and the most truest men that I've ever known, that I've ever served with, and will have ever known in my entire life. To these men and their families, the nation, the United States Army, and myself are forever grateful. There are some of you looking back at me right now and you're eyeing my uniform. You're looking at my shoulder boards. You're looking at my coat. And you're looking, most importantly, at my sash, the scarlet red. They're not of that of a general. Well, as luck and providence would see to it, as well as my superior officers, they felt as though that I exhibited coolness under pressure, leadership, and distinguished bravery during the Battle of Five Forks in April of 1865, due to which I was promoted to the rank of Brigadier General. From the date of my promotion to the date of Robert E. Lee having good enough sense to actually surrender his brave Southern command, I was tasked with 3 more duties and services, which included the last one, excuse me, it's been a long, rough road upon the dust and the horseback this evening. 3 more duties of command, the last of which, though, included the mustering out of my men in July of 1865. As such, I never received the opportunity to visit a sutler and procure myself the coat or the sash of a general. But besides, a man need not a wool coat, a sash, or anything on his shoulders to command his men such as a general. All that is needed is the respect and the trust of his men around him. This trust and this respect is not given. It is only earned. And for me, I earned that upon the battlefields across the Great South, walking alongside them, serving alongside them, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, and many times leading our advances and charges upon horseback, face to face with the enemy. While serving along these great men, 8 times, death visited my door, and I did not let her in. But this was only made possible, this great escape, only made possible through the great help of our great providence. If you would allow me, though, I would like to reflect upon a few of these chance encounters. You have to excuse me, I'm breaking up a little bit. I've lost a number of men. A few of them were my closest comrades. So if you would allow me, I'd like to reflect upon a bit of these chance encounters and a few of these engagements that I served with Mifflin County's greatest and bravest, many of whom are now known only to God. The first of which, though, was the Battle of Fredericksburg in December of 1862. The men and I were engaged in a heavy volume of firing from the enemy and they from us. Though we lost many men that day, and though I was almost killed by a 24-pound artillery ball, we held the line steady and continued to advance upon the enemy, of whom was dug deep into the woods and into their pits. Seeing that our regiment was holding strong, our regimental commander, General Gibbon, ordered our regiment and others to give the enemy the bayonet and take those woods. I then gave my regiment the order to unsling their knapsacks upon their backs, fix bayonets, and take those woods. As we advanced, I reminded the men that now was the time to do their duty. It was the honor of the state of Pennsylvania rested upon them. Because at this moment in history upon that battlefield, we were the only regiment from this great state. Once in proper placement and range, I gave them the order to charge. Many of the men immediately fell, being fired upon, but even more continued. In a brief moment, we were head to head with the enemy, so close, as you are now to me right now, I could see the whites of their eyes. But in that brief moment when we were head to head, we passed their color bearers, we broke their line, and we took those woods as commanded. It is so vivid in my memory that it feels like it was just yesterday. Though this was a great day for the 107th Pennsylvania Volunteers, I wish to indulge you in 6 more ballads of glory. Do not be troubled, though. They're not long. They sing with passion and with victory. The first of which, though, my adjutant and Lieutenant Thomas and myself were mounted, our horse facing the battery, just about to the left of the end of the magazine. We were chatting about the passing events, and during this time, shells were exploding amongst us in close vicinity, but fortunately, no casualties were sustained thus far. A shell was now in the air. It flew across us. So close, though, and it rang out like the sound of a locomotive steaming across the sky unseen. The noise of the shell was very great that my horse even winced. But thanks to an ever-kind and preserving providence, not one drop of blood was spilled by this missile of death. But whereas if it has been at least 2 to 3 inches left or to my right, my esteemed colleague and myself, as well as our horses, would have been a broken, bleeding mass of horse and humanity tangled together in one common catastrophe. This is war, and this is what your great men saw. Many of us know that a soldier fears many things, but none of which are as feared as much as being captured by the enemy. Well, this fear manifested itself one fateful day, and it was certainly one of my darkest memories. I must have had a team of angels and a great friend in Providence, because he granted me safe passage that day, and upon returning to my regiment with several others, we actually escaped from being terribly overran that August of 1864. But luckily, in the heat and excitement of the battle and artillery and musket fire upon us from left and right, I was able to flee the wretched butternut and gray. Let me tell you, I do not want to be with them ever again. After returning to and reforming my regimental line, we were able to progress to our next engagement. Although for me, it was the nearest I would come to being shot. It still gives me fear and pause now. I was fully exposed as I rode along our line. I was seeing to it that things were made in order, and that the men were following orders properly, and that everything was ready. As I went along, the balls were not flying very numerously, but they seemed to come very close to me, but only within range of a sharpshooter could pull off. My men's heads were down to avoid being hit, mine being exposed, of course, being mounted. As I got to the southwest angle of the fort and just passing the end of the magazine, my head opposite to and close to the end of it, though, and behind me, just now with these benches, there was a close piece of timber. Well, just at that moment, a mini ball grazed my ear and slammed itself into that wood. That's the closest I came. That's the closest I ever want to come to meeting my Maker or death herself. Perhaps the only thing, though, that more exciting and more thrilling than hearing and missing death that many times was when I received my promotion to Brigadier General. It was a great day. In this moment, I will spare you the intricacies of the battle. Of course, to many of us as soldiers, we get balled up in those moments of great courage and esteem. But I'll spare you. But I shall mention that some of the greatest minds and the greatest men that I've ever heard of and ever known met that day of Five Forks, some of which included General Ulysses S. Grant, soon to be president, of course, as we know now, General Philip Sheridan, General Henry Baxter, and of course the Gray Fox's right-hand man, Major General George E. Pickett. I may have earned a promotion from that battle, but the men of the 107th Pennsylvania Volunteers received praise from our brigade commander. This isn't something to take lightly. You don't just receive praise from the brigade commander on some sunny day. You have to earn that with blood, sweat, and tears. I look around right now and I see that some of us are growing a little bit weary from the day's work in the fields and a bit sore-bottomed or scrooching a bit. Well, do not fret. I will only bend your ear for 2 more short stories. And don't worry, after of which you'll be able to venture out into the cool night's breeze, and I'll be able to take off this wool coat and join you perhaps for some coffee. One of the stories, though, that I will share with you is quite amusing. As many of you know, an army marches upon its feet for many miles a day. Same with the officers. We march too with the men, sometimes on horseback, and other times we give the horse a break and we march with the men. Well, one of those days, my colleague, another general, we relieved our men to rest. As they went to rest, they unslinged their knapsacks and they took a bit of water in. Well, the general and I, we walked over to a huge shade tree. As we approached it, though, we noticed there was another man sitting underneath that tree with a sword and sash, much like mine. Well, as I approached him, I realized this wasn't just a great general. This was soon to be the honored and revered General George E. Meade. Never would I have ever imagined myself taking rest alongside a lion of a man such as him. It was another great of my honors. The last bout of glory that I wish to spoil you with occurs during the Battle of Weldon Railroad. This perhaps is my favorite stories of battle and of honor that I had. One of the greatest men of our regiment, Corporal Hodenstein, and a few of his brothers in arms were temporarily captured. But once captured by the enemy, they did not simply rest and take, oh my gosh, well, we're captured, let's give up. No, they realized that their state and their country needed them. They turned upon their captors. They took them prisoner, and Corporal Hodenstein ran over and took the colors of the enemy. As he took them, he led the men out of being captured and back to our front lines, whereupon the field he delivered the flag to General Crawford. The story, though, doesn't end there. To my frustration, to my wit's end, to my complete dissatisfaction, my orders were not strictly followed following that instance. You see, I recommended the corporal to be presented with the Medal of Honor. I signed off on the account as being true. The recipient of the flag, General Crawford, signed off on it as being true. Corporal Hodenstein captured that flag. He brought it back to our lines, delivered it to General Crawford. But as I stood there at attention a few weeks later at a ceremony for this medal, my anger began to well up. I try to hold my tongue. I try to be as humble and as patient as I possibly can. But under this matter, I dedicated myself to making sure, though, that Corporal Hodenstein had the proper justice due to him, because on that day, when my anger filled up, the wrong corporal was given the Medal of Honor. You can't make this up. This happened. I've never been so angry. Well, like I said, I dedicated myself to seeing to it that the justice had been given to that proper corporal, the proper honor given to him for capturing the enemy's flag. From my experience in the Army, having learned the treating of red tape, I concluded to have justice done to this soldier, and 5 months later, a few days would pass since my anger was rooted on this subject. And during this time, Corporal Hodenstein would leave the ceremony and be engaged again in battle, just as many of us had been. He would find himself being injured, though. Upon being injured, it was not mortally wounded, thank goodness. He would be evacuated and heading north to a hospital to receive treatment. Well, shortly after he departed, a small package arrived. And inside of it was the Medal of Honor for my corporal. It was not until the near of the close of the war that he would return to the regiment when I would make known to him the success in having him cited in this singularly strange transaction. As such, he would need... It was not until the near close of the war, though, like I said, that this would actually be able to manifest itself into some type of ceremony upon when I received that package. I gave no notice of the ceremony that I selected to have done to this corporal. I figured this man had been humiliated. He did not receive the Medal of Honor that I promised him, that I well, thought he should be given for capturing that flag. So, keeping the regiment and all other generals and officers ignorant, I made sure the ceremony was conducted. I made sure that the Medal of Honor was with me at all times to make sure that that wouldn't happen again, that the wrong corporal would be given it. Well, when the ceremony convened, the corporal was now part of the 40th Regiment, a flag bearer for them. As I took my space in front of the entire crowd of soldiers upon that ceremony, I called the corporal a few steps forward. Now remember, none of the regiment other than him knew what was going on. As I called him forward, and before the medal was presented, the Battle of the Weldon Railroad of August 19, 1864 was recounted, along with the capture, the mutiny, and taking of the enemy's prisoners and capturing their enemy's flag. Well, the corporal can have this, the Medal of Honor, as well as his wound scar, and the substantial testimony that I, and of course General Crawford, had given to bear and satisfy his friends that he had been a brave and faithful soldier in the cause of his country. I do not know if justice was ever given to the corporal who was awarded the Medal of Honor improperly. But that's okay. I believe that great providence has a way of catching up with some of us in things that happen of this nature. At this time, though, I would like to thank you once again for inviting me to speak on behalf of the brave men who fought to protect and to preserve our great nation, as well as on behalf of the 107th Pennsylvania Volunteers. I pray that our nation will never be tasked with fighting or enduring such a bloody and costly war ever again. But know this: if the hell of war falls upon us once again, I know this, and you need to know this, that I have no question that the men, the women, the sons, the daughters, and the families of Mifflin County will be there in the darkest hour, shining brightly as a beacon of strength and courage for all to see. I thank you.